Your support makes this Miracle Channel program possible.
I'm John Van Sloten, and I'm the author of The Day Metallica Came to Church, Searching for the Everywhere God in Everything. It all began when I preached a sermon on U2, and a young kid in our congregation came up to me after the sermon and said, "Hey, Pastor John, can you preach a sermon on my band?" And before I asked him what his band's name was, I said yes, and he said, "Okay, well, my band's Metallica." And then we both kind of looked down at the floor and didn't know what to do. And I told him I'd pray about it, which is how us pastors sometimes slough people off. And the next morning, that night I did pray about it, and the next morning somebody who's new to the church called me and said he had 2 tickets for the Metallica concert that Thursday and wondered if my wife and I would go. And so we ended up going to the concert, thinking that was some divine hand in what God was doing there, and had an experience at the concert. It was loud, it was smoky, it was everything that a metal concert would be, but there was a moment near the end of the concert where they sang "Nothing Else Matters." And it's kind of an acoustic ballad, and everybody in the congregation, everybody in the Saddle Dome put their arms around their girlfriends, and they all started singing along with James Hetfield. And the song is a kind of lament. And as they were singing it, I just turned around. My wife and I were right on the edge of the stage and just looked around the Saddle Dome and saw 17,000 Calgarians crying out to God that life is not the way it should be. And that kind of got my heart, and I thought, okay, I got to look at this some more. And so I went back and listened to the lyrics of every single song Metallica had written up until that point, and I found as I was doing that, there were these connection points. I'd read a lyric and go, I know that, that's from this part of the Bible. And all these sort of Metallica biblical couplets came together in my mind. And so I wrote all of those down, and then I went to research the band and found out that why they were so angry. And 2 of the band members in particular had horrible childhoods growing up. Hetfield grew up in a Christian sect that told his mom that she just had to have faith and her cancer would go away, and she died of that cancer. And the other guitarist was abused by his father terribly for his 16th birthday. His dad beat his mom up. And my heart kind of broke for the human beings that were authoring and singing a lot of these songs. And then I did some more research on James Hetfield, and there was a quote where he was obviously further on in terms of dealing with his anger and rage about God and the church and things that are wrong in the world. And he was saying to an interviewer that he's realized that he can't drink his anger away or sing it away, rage it away. He can't drug it away, but he realizes the only way he's going to get rid of his anger is through forgiveness. And the moment I read that, I knew that I could preach this band. If a heavy metal lead singer is preaching a gospel of forgiveness, that gets me close enough to what our gospel is, which is obviously hugely about forgiveness as well. And so I can keep going. We preached the band, and 200 metalheads came to church that Sunday. Lars Ulrich called Warner Music Canada and said, "Send a camera crew down to that church. We want to film it." The reason he was intrigued was because we weren't slamming the band, which I'm sure lots of churches have done for them and for heavy metal music in general. We were comparing them in a positive way to Old Testament prophets. Metallica got mad in many of their songs at the same things the Old Testament prophets and Jesus got angry at. So they came, they filmed it. We thought they were going to sue us and take us down like they took down Napster for using their music, but they were genuinely intrigued in what we were doing. And then the story went around the world. I had interviews with rock stations, not faith-based rock stations, across North America, Irish National Radio. It was on rollingstone.com. This huge story about this crazy church that dared to see some of God's good in the music of Metallica. Well, it is my heart that people belong to God, but it's scriptural. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Psalm 24 starts with those words. There is a worldview that says that everything is God's, the whole world. God so loved the world, He loves everything that He made. He made material reality. He made human beings. He made human beings with creative capacities to make music. God loves all of those things. He hates that it's messed up, that it's broken, that sin has entered into the world and corrupted everything. But just because things are corrupted doesn't mean they've lost their original creational goodness. And the worldview that we're living out of is that things are still innately good, even though everything has been tainted and twisted and perverted by sin. And so theologically, that's how we justify looking for God in these places. But we also justify it by believing that, Christ, God came to us, right? He came from a perfect, holy place to a dirty, broken place with a bunch of messed up people like you and me, and did that to reach us and touch us and introduce us to who He is. Why would the Spirit of Christ not be doing that right now at a Metallica concert, or in a movie theater, or through the science of kids studying at the University of Lethbridge or in Calgary? This has been a journey for us as a church, and it happened to us as a church. We used to do culturally relevant sermons to be relevant. Now we're doing these cultural, creational sermons because we believe they're revelatory. We're moving from just being relevant to being revelatory. And so you'll see a progression. If you go to our church website at newhopechurch.ca and just click the links and find the messages, progression where early messages were pretty much using cultural stuff as illustration.